see, on the impressive qualifications for our speakers that are right there in front of you. I'd like to thank Mitch, Iris, and Amy for their work in organizing these grand rounds. And we'll get going. So the speakers are going to come up, and we also have two virtual speakers. So we have Dr. Tito Dado joining us from, he's at GBGH today, so he's going to jump on the line. And then we have another physician, Dr. Carolyn Ham, who's joining us from Windsor. So please, excuse while we switch from live action to virtual here on the fly. So we'll go to the next slide. Oh, there's a quick. I'll do it myself. Like to acknowledge all the partnerships we have, which clinical trials would be possible without partnerships, both within RVH and the industry. So, the first speaker for today is going to be Daniela Vieira. She's the second engagement lead for oncology at AstraZeneca Canada. So let's all welcome Daniela.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me here today. And I'm really thrilled to be opening up Grand Rounds. Thank you so much for the introduction. So as mentioned, my name is Daniela Vieira, and I'm the site engagement lead for oncology specifically at AstraZeneca. Unfortunately, my counterpart there in the biopharm space wasn't able to make it, but that's her face there in case you see her around. So I was asked to come and speak just very briefly about what clinical trials are. So clinical trials, in its very basic definition, is a controlled research study involving either healthy volunteers or people with a specific disease or condition that are conducted by clinical physicians and researchers as well. And that's to evaluate the safety of a treatment, such as a medicine or device, and also understand how well it works. There are two types of clinical trials. The first is interventional. That's probably what you see a lot of here at the hospital. So this is where there's an actual treatment or a device being used for a patient to either detect, prevent, or manage their disease or condition, versus an observational study, which is using either retrospective data review or things like questionnaire-based clinical trials. There are different phases in a trial. There's a preclinical phase, usually in a lab setting. Phase 1 would be a first-in-human trial. This is where a very small patient population participates in the trial, where we're looking either for an initial dose for a medicine and also the first data regarding the safety of that medicine. Then it moves on to phase 2, a little bit larger of a patient population. Generally, a dose has already been established. Phase 3 is a registrational trial. So this is where we've honed in on a particular condition with a specific medicine, and we're looking for a wider patient population in order to submit for regulatory approval. In Canada, that'd be to Health Canada. In the US, that'd be the FDA, which also has the ability to come on site here and review your patient data. And then after that approval, trials can be in a phase 4 space, which is, this is the post approval phase. So clinical trials are incredibly important. Every medicine that you've ever taken in your life has come from a clinical trial. So this brings potential new detection methods, treatments, and vaccines to people living with a specific disease or condition to improve the quality of their lives. And there's a number of benefits to participating in a clinical trial. So you have access to new treatment options that are either not currently available on the market or not funded by the provincial health authority. Valuable contribution to medical research, enhanced access to medical specialists and close health monitoring. If you've ever looked at a clinical trial protocol or worked on a clinical trial, you may have seen that the frequency of visits to the hospital is more than in a standard of care setting. And a deeper experience with medical care. So patients are often better able to play an active role in their healthcare. So these are the different ways that patients and staff can get involved in clinical trials. So if you're a patient or a caregiver, you have the opportunity to participate in a patient partnership program. So if you're interested in a particular pharmaceutical company, you can go on their website and you can apply to be on the patient partnership program, essentially giving feedback to study protocols from the patient and caregiver perspective. If you're a clinician, you can participate in the design feasibility stage of a clinical trial. So in advance of a clinical protocol being finalized by that pharmaceutical company, they'll invite a panel of physicians to review the protocol and see if it's feasible for the patients that protocol is looking to investigate a treatment or device in. Physicians can also participate in a physician advisory board, which can be done in advance of a clinical trial or during the conduct of the clinical trial, in which again, they can give feedback on the protocol, but also have a discussion about how the findings of that research study are going to be applied in the real world setting. And then lastly, clinicians can get involved by referral. So there's a lot of clinical trials going on in Ontario. If your site's not running one of them, but the patient's interested in that particular trial, a physician can always partner with the institution that's running that trial and refer them for that research opportunity. Other healthcare staff can get involved in a clinical trial coordinator panel. So if you're a clinical trial coordinator, there are pharma companies that will ask those coordinators to give feedback on behalf of the patient. So in a patient advocate position, how feasible is that clinical study for the patients that they're seeing every day in clinic? Between healthcare staff and the clinicians, they can facilitate a clinical trial. So that means that they can open the trial at a particular center, recruit patients to it, collect the data, and feed that back to the pharma company. Common to everybody, you can volunteer with the ethics committee, so you can become a member and review different protocols and advocate for patients based on that protocol design. And also you can participate in a clinical trial. So clinical trials, depending on what that trial is, will take either healthy volunteers or a patient with a condition or disease. So if you qualify, you're eligible for that participation. And that's it for me.
Thanks so much, Danielle. We're going to pull questions till the very end. We're doing it as a panel. Again, there's been fascinating lots of speakers. Now, unfortunately, Dr. Deodato has some clinical engagement at GBH where he's working, speaking. I assume he cannot make it, unfortunately. So we're going to have to skip him for now. And we're going to move on to see if we got there with Julio. Kelly Cruz. What's her name? And Christine, put together. Perfect. So Kelly and Christine, Kelly Cruz is our clinical research supervisor here at the Royal Victoria Regional Health Center, and Christine Marco is our clinical trial supervisor here at the RVH. So we'll give warm welcome.
Thank you, everyone, for being here today. All right, I'm going to give you a quick overview on clinical trials and research, our infrastructure, and how we work to be sustainable here to continue to do the great work that we do. So if you just see here quickly, clinical trials and research is rapidly expanding across our organization. And in November 2021, we merged with the research office. What that has allowed us to do is it's provided a centralized team, which allows us to grow research capacity and allows us to have shared resources, greater engagement of academic and industry partners. It increases our audit and inspection readiness, as well as provides us with standard documentation across the organization for running research and clinical trials. The two boxes below just provide sort of an overview of some of the areas and disease sites that we are running clinical trials and research on here within the organization. Our infrastructure. If we look back in 1986, Dr. Bryn Presnell participated in the first clinical trial at RVH. Dr. Presnell was devoted to providing novel cancer treatment and care closer to home for our community. To date, we have participated in over 175 clinical trials and research projects, ranging from medical and radiation oncology, surgery, emergency medicine, critical care and ICU, and mental health. I'm sure there are a lot of other departments that are doing research as well. These are just ones that we sort of are more familiar with. In 2019, we underwent our first Health Canada inspection. We received a compliant rating, thankfully, and it was a very comprehensive inspection. It was the first one for us, and so it was a very big learning experience, and it identified some of the deficiencies in our internal processes and our framework. In collaboration with a lot of the internal departments that we work with and other stakeholders, we were able to establish robust processes and a solid infrastructure that we can continue to sustain and use moving forward as we continue to grow and expand our departments. In late 2022, we had our second Health Canada inspection. Once again, we received a compliant rating. Based on the inspection report, it was evident that we continue to achieve and follow the processes that we implemented in 2019. The inspector was very gracious in saying that he was very thankful to see that all of the processes that we implemented in 2019 continue to be followed, and he was quite impressed to see the great work that we do here for clinical trials and research. And it truly takes a village to do what we do. These are just some of the internal departments and some of the roles of individuals within the organization that support all of the work that we do. It's not just the clinical trials department. It's not just the research office alone. If it wasn't for all of these other departments and all of these other individuals, we wouldn't be as successful as we are today. So we can't thank all of these departments enough for the support that they provide for the work that we do. Sustainability is a very big thing. And being one of the top recruiting community hospitals in Ontario, it's not about the income, it's about the outcome for us. So working with our industry and academic partners, we select novel treatment trial options for our patients. And we have a sustainability plan in place, and that helps us to grow and expand our clinical trials department. And this includes having a really careful balance of academic and industry trials. We want to ensure we don't teeter too much one way or the other, just so that we have that financial sustainability to continue to keep the staff we have in our departments, continue to grow and expand in what we do. Oncologists can offer experimental treatment options for their patients. Immunotherapy is a great example. It's paved the way for new standard of care treatments. And as Daniela had shared earlier, the drugs we have today are because of the work that we all do, clinical trials, research. And it's also very important to be sustainable that we're fulfilling our enrollment commitments. And so we work with our PI and our sponsors to ensure we have a patient population to achieve and where possible exceed our enrollment targets. We have our robust internal study selection process, and that ensures that we have the resources, the equipment, the staffing, and the internal department support to open trials at our site. And this is just a little something, food for thought. Imagine the possibilities. This is something that's been sort of in the background for us for many, many years that we've been talking about, and that's trying to develop our own clinical research organization. And what we hope to be able to do with that is to be able to provide trial staffing and support for physicians in our community that are conducting research or trials in their own private offices. And so that we can also work with our community businesses and partners to support research and innovation throughout our community. And we're hoping as well to collaborate with some of our regional partners. We have a lot of smaller hospitals, community hospitals in our catchment area, and we would like to be able to work with them to be able to develop satellite sites so that we can bring novel treatment and care closer to home for those patients in those areas like Collingwood and Midland, Georgian Bay. And then we want to also establish a framework that we can train and qualify these sites to support this research and the clinical trials that we do. I like this one. Vision with action makes a powerful reality.
Thank you. Thank you, Christine. So I was asked to represent the research team at RVH during this talk today. So while it does take a village, there is also a group of individuals behind the scenes that help to make this all possible. I'm going to tell you a little bit about who we are and what we do and how we conduct research at RVH. I think we need a whole separate grand rounds to kind of discuss what's involved in that, so I'll do my best. So too often from the outside lens, we see the recruitment numbers that journal in the publication. And yes, these are important, but What does it take to get there? Who helps us achieve these milestones? Change practice in advanced medicine. Who is on the front line of these clinical trials? So it's the individuals listed here. It's the investigator as well, who shows up early the next day after a long on-call shift to have a site initiation visit. It's the clinical trials nurses meeting with the patient for the first time after receiving a difficult diagnosis and presenting a clinical trial. It's our clinical trial pharmacists and technicians who are ensuring that the intricacies of the protocol when they're developing the care plans and dispensing the medication. So there's so much that goes into it. And our research associates, so you can see there's so many roles involved. They're in the lab, processing the lab samples, ensuring that all of those requirements are met, entering all those data points. So the list is endless, and we just want to recognize them as well here today, just so that you get a glimpse of what it looks like. Same with our ethics coordinators and our REB. They receive these big, long submissions and long consent forms, and it's their job to work with the board to ensure that, is it protecting our participants' rights? Is it clear? Can they understand that? And of course, we can't forget the participants, because they are at the center of all that we do, and we couldn't do it without them. So this is just a fraction of it, and I'm sure each one of us in our team would be able to share so many more parts about what we do and why we do it. So we are very fortunate to have a very specialized and highly skilled team, starting from our chief research scientists to our research supervisors, the nurses, and everyone that I've discussed today. Although we are a community hospital, we have built and are expanding a really solid infrastructure, and that I don't think people are really aware of. Each member of this team is very important in the role that we play. We're each dependent upon each other each day to make each trial a success. So while there's a lot of behind the scenes work, we all work towards the same common goal in protecting our participants and making them feel safe during this journey. So more often on the medicine side of things, we often get staff and physicians that say they didn't know about us, they didn't know about the research office, or that we did trials, or that we're here to support them. So I'm here to tell you that we are here to support you if you are interested in looking and doing clinical trials. So between both teams, we do offer a variety of services, everything from study initiation support, having that initial research question, not knowing where to go, concept design, supporting the coordination in every day of the studies as well. Julia would likely talk about REDCap, so we do have an internal database that we offer to our researchers that we help guide them through on how to collect the data, analyze, and do all of that. So for new investigators and researchers and those who are new to clinical trials and thinking of getting involved, we can also support you. Whether you have a new research question you'd like to explore, or you've been approached by AstraZeneca to do a multi-site clinical trial and not sure if you can do it or if you have the support to do it. So if you are considering, we encourage you to explore the possibilities and come to us. If you don't ask, we don't know. And what could be a small idea, a small project, or just the beginning can end up having so much impact in the end, and you'd be glad that you started with that question. Yes, for the first time, it can be daunting to navigate through all of the regulatory requirements, the ethics submission, and that's where we come in. And that's why my goal today is to spread the word that at first it can be overwhelming, but we're here to support you in doing that. While our oncology team has demonstrated that there is potential to grow a large program, I think outside of oncology, we have the same potential. We just need the people who are interested to come forward and for us to support them. So our intention is to make that first experience a pleasant one and encourage these new investigators to participate in research and to continue to do so after their first trial. Having been through the audit process, like Christine mentioned, we know what to expect. Between our team, we have many years of experience, and we're here to know what needs to be in place to help guide you through that. So a little bit of a different perspective. Where does this all leave us? Why are we encouraging Team RVH to conduct research in clinical trials? Mainly in the medicine side, we are still growing our program. So why do we do this? How do we grow, and how do we expand it across all of these programs? It's innovative. It's a different kind of innovation, and depending who you ask, innovation can have a different meaning, but that really is what research is. It drives innovation in healthcare. It's also helping us to grow growing in our community, supporting our community, and our patients seeking to access these programs rather than traveling down the highway, down the 400 to go to UHN or PMH. How can we grow? Well, of course, we want to maintain and strengthen those existing partnerships that we have and grow new ones. But we also need the current researchers that we have, and we have some very strong researchers, to share their successes and what their lessons that they learned along the way, and encourage each other to do the same. And as a team, we'll continue to support each other with each research endeavor, work together and think big. So this is, I really love quotes, and we like to end on quotes. So this is a Henry Ford quote. And I think it really resonates closely with research and clinical trials and what we do every day here. It's about how we work together to progress, to succeed, and advance care. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Christine and Kelly. Next speaker is Dr. Nancy Trimble. Nancy is relatively recently retired here in Barrie and is the chair of our research ethics board.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me to speak. Can you hear me? Hello. I'm Nancy Trimble, and I'm the chair of the Research Ethics Board. I've been the chair since I started this job the same week that the pandemic started. It's been just fantastic. Dr. Edward Partani is my co-chair, and of course he's not here today, I see, but he's very helpful in that process. There should be another slide here. Oh, do I make it go? I just have one. So the purpose of the Research Ethics Board at RVH is to protect the rights, safety, and well-being of study participants. Those could be patients who are participating in a study, or also staff members who are participating in studies about processes, etc. The REB reviews all proposals for research that would be conducted at RVH, as well as those at Georgian Bay General Hospital in Midland and Bright Shores, used to be another name, in Owen Sound, as we are the board of record for both of those hospitals. And we are also accredited by Clinical Trials Ontario. And last year we passed our updated accreditation for Clinical Trials Ontario. So they may send us studies that we could also review. The REB is a volunteer board. There are currently 15 members, and they represent an impressively wide range of expertise and perspective. There are physicians, nurses, there's a pharmacist, there are other clinical people. There's a representative from the privacy office, a patient representative, community representatives, lawyers, and an Indigenous representative as well. There's a lot of expertise and insight represented at our Research Ethics Board, and the discourse at our meetings is quite illuminating. Dr. Dideodato and Greta Hutton are two members of the board who will be speaking at this meeting. I hope Julio's still speaking, and I'm sure you'll find their insights are quite valuable as well. Our two full-time coordinators, Deborah Peterson and Victoria Shellup, organize the board's work, keep copious records required by regulations, copious records, and are the prime contact for those wishing to address the board. Their contact information is on the slide as well. So if you have questions with respect to your research REB application, you should contact them and they will help you with your inquiries. Deb and Victoria have a lot of experience and knowledge in this area and provide invaluable support to the Research Ethics Board. And they also babysit me, the poor things. The board meets once a month, usually on the third Wednesday of the month, but we don't meet in July or August, although we can process applications during the summer. We try to maintain reasonable turnaround times so that for approving applications, so that investigators can get on with their work promptly, because they're often quite keen to get going. There are various levels of approval required for studies, depending on the nature of the study and the amount of risk and et cetera. Clinical trials generally do require full board review. So when a study application is received, Deb and Victoria will go through it to ensure that it's complete and that the documentation is all present. They then assign the review to two of the board members who will be the principal reviewers. Those two people go through those studies, which are this thick generally, with a fine-tooth comb, assessing the protocol and the consent according to a set of criteria that we have in our checklists, in our armamentarium. We look to see whether the protocol seems like it will show what it's meant to scientifically. And if we need science backup, we have someone who will review the science and the statistical analysis of what this proposal is putting forward. We also like to see that what the risks and benefits are to participants, and quite a lot of our work is focused on the consents to make sure that they're comprehensible to people who do not have a PhD in medical terminology, and that they set out what participants in a study would be expected to do and what would happen to them and how many bloodletting tests they would have, and also what the risks to participating in the study would be. So the two board members who are the principal reviewers do all that work and make copious notes, etc. Those board members then come to the meeting and present the study and their assessment to the full board at the next meeting generally. So we get right on it as a rule. The other board members will have also read the studies as well. And then we have a discussion about any concerns that are brought up. And the board then decides what level of approval or disapproval we will give to the study. We can either approve it the way it's written, just give a big check mark and let them go ahead, or we can approve it with a request for clarifications or modifications, which we often do request. We can also defer the study if we think that we need more information or it's not really presented in a complete form, or we can reject it or decline it. I've never seen the board decline or reject a study to date, because we're all very positive about research. We want to promote research as well as does everybody else in this hospital, which is a huge research place. If there are modifications or changes to be made, these are quickly communicated back to the principal investigator so that they can be addressed and then returned to us. And generally then, if those are looked after, then we will approve the study promptly. Once a study commences, there's ongoing monitoring with various annual renewals, notifications of amendments, notifications if there are any serious adverse events, and other changes in the protocol or the study until the study is terminated or closed, at which time we're advised of that as well. I asked our board members, because this was a question that I was put to, what they saw as barriers to carrying out clinical trials at RVH, because that's going to be one of our kind of questions here. We agreed that we don't think that the Research Ethics Board represents a significant barrier because we're really pro-research and we try to cooperate with principal investigators and research people as best as we can. Their comment was mostly that they thought it was likely the other resources, financial resources, to support adequate research staff, education of PIs and other research staff, and et cetera. And I'm sure that this will come up at the end as well. The Research Ethics Board website, which is noted up there, has a lot of information, as well as the forms that you would need to make an application request an amendment, do an annual renewal, report an SAE, etc., and also the termination of studies. So I suggest that you please have a look at it and feel free to direct any of your questions to our staff or to me or any of the board members. I hope that's a bit helpful to you about the REB's role, and thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Trimble. Up next, we have two speakers. We have Greta Hutton, and Greta is one of our REB community representatives. She's also a patient representative from the Canadian Cancer Clinical Trials Network. And Carly Ross, who's a life and wellness coach, author, cancer survivor, and a clinical trials patient.
I can't believe I'm here. 10 years ago, I would never have foreseen this at all. Both the growth in the research capacity here at RVH. So I'd just like to start with an analogy. When you throw a stone into a pond, you never know what the ripples will touch. So my initial diagnosis was stage 4 mantle cell lymphoma in 2014. And when I first had my meeting with the initial oncology team, there was no option of clinical trials mentioned until my sister said, well, what about the clinical trial in Hamilton? And then that led to me participating in the Janssen Shine trial at Javinsky. So I started treatment in June of 2014 with bendamustine and rituximab 6 rounds, plus ibrutinib or a placebo. And I found out 2 years ago that I was in the placebo group. Amazing. My oncologist called Janssen twice because he couldn't quite get his head around that. What I've learned as a patient, it was important for me to give back, but I've also, as a patient, when you participate in trials and you take advantage of the opportunities to give back that are presented to you, you also gain. So some of the things I've learned as a patient partner in the research space for the last 9 years is, number one was clinical trial website development, that real patient stories can encourage trial accrual. So if you look on Hamilton Cancer Trials, you'll see the poster child here. Joining 3CTN in 2015, I was on the remote access for trials team, and that was based on my belief that it shouldn't matter where you live in Canada to have access to cutting edge treatments. And the pilot project in Northern BC, Northern Ontario, and Newfoundland, I was part of that whole process. That was quite exciting endeavor. 3CTN currently is involved in developing a learning annex with Pfizer funding. And what I've learned from that is it should be easier for hospitals to seek and to train patient partners. And that will soon be an online access for training resources for patient partners based on their skill sets and their interests. So that should make life a whole lot easier for recruiting patient partners. I've also been involved in multiple patient advocacy programs, American Association for Cancer Research, BioCanRx, Canadian Cancer Research. And what I learned there is that young scientists can learn from and be motivated by putting faces and stories to the work that they do so that they can visualize the outcomes. They get to see the whole forest when they're working on the trees. Testing online clinical trial search engines and permission to contact at RVH that Sujata and I have been involved in. It was shocking initially when I got involved to realize that only about 7% of cancer patients participate in trials. And I learned at AACR in 2019 that the best possible outcome for cancer patients is trial participation. The hardest part for me was finding a clinical trial in the first place. And the Ask Me campaign that's been part of 3CTN for the last few years is good, but it still puts the onus on the patient to seek out information about trials. My belief is that the initial meeting with the oncology team should include discussion about trials, which the permission to contact program here is addressing very well. Also being part of the REB here at RVH for the last year, and I also did a presentation at the Hamilton Health Sciences REB a few years back. And what I learned there is the voice of patients are heard and make a difference. And research is best conducted with us and not to us.
Guys, thanks for having me. So as mentioned before, I am a participant of the trial. I'll give you a little bit of backstory. When I was 30 years old, I was first diagnosed with stage 2 breast cancer. Very surprising, very shocking. I had a young family at the time, and the treatment path for me was to have lumpectomies and then do radiation therapy, which I did. And that was great. I moved on from that. Fast forward to 2019, I decided that I was going to do reconstructive surgery. So we had an implant placed into the cancer breast and a balancing on the other side. That went well, no problem. Fast forward to 2022, I noticed that there was changes happening in my breast, and it was strange. It was, nipple retraction, skin color changing. So what I did was I took some photos. I showed my husband, showed my best friend, and they're like, no, you need to go to the doctor. So in my mind, I actually thought that something had happened to the implant. I thought there was leakage or something like that. So I tried to reach out to the surgeon, but they were away for the next 2 weeks. So with a lot of force in pushing, I went to emergency, which they told me, I don't know if I see what you're talking about. So I literally had to pull my cell phone out and show the doctor, and then he was like, oh, okay. So he went and he got input from another doctor, and the decision was to have me come back the following day, do an ultrasound, and to also get whatever results they could see, which is what I did. And upon that visit, they basically told me that yes, they did see actually 4 tumors in the breast that had the implants, and that they were going to refer me over to the cancer center. I have to say, obviously, complete shock. Nobody wants to hear that, especially for the second time. But I have to say that at this hospital, the cancer center is hands down, just simply amazing. And the team that was, assigned to me, they gave me options. They gave me all the information that I needed to make a good decision on what the treatment path was that I felt I needed for myself. And so we decided the treatment path would be 16 rounds of chemo. It would be surgery, radiation, and hopefully everything would be okay after that point. When I started the chemotherapy, my oncologist mentioned to me about a trial. And he just kind of dropped the seed, he just mentioned and said, we are doing a trial. We don't want to talk to you about it right now because you probably won't even need it. But just so that you know, there's a trial that we are doing here at RVH, and we'll see how things go with you and then take it from there. So for me, as a second-time cancer patient, I would say that was really hopeful, because for me, I was like, okay, I've had this thing twice. If I go through all of this treatment and it's still there, at least I know that potentially I could be a part of something that might give me a little bit more chance. So we went through the treatment. I had the surgery. And yes, unfortunately, after surgery, they told me that I still had the disease. So at that point, I was given a little team And they basically gave me all the information that I needed to consider whether or not I wanted to be a part of this trial. And even though it was a lot of information, they included everything in there. So, everything from the side effects to how long I would be in it, pros and cons. And there at no point did I feel that I was pushed or swayed. They really just gave me the information. They gave me room to really think about it, to discuss it with family. And they were a resource. So anything that I needed, I could always call on them and they would clarify that. And that was super important to me, to have that type of support. And so I went through the trial after radiation. So that was a commitment of an additional 6 months of going back into chemo. And at that point, I had nothing to lose, really. But I can stand here today and say that I completed the trial in October of 2023, and I'm cancer-free. So what that tells me is that, for someone who is going through treatment and then at the end of it, they're told, it's still there, having a trial be presented to you is giving you, as a patient, it's giving you hope. And so I previously knew nothing about trials. When people would mention a trial, for me, it would be like, I'm not going to be anybody's guinea pig, because you don't understand what it's about. But I think that if patients are educated on trials, if they, like I said, my oncologist, dropped that seed in my ear, from the moment he did that, I was on Google pulling up, trials about cancer and the pros and cons and where they were at. So I think if we are given the opportunity to be aware that there are trials out there, then it gives patients a much more ability to say whether or not they want to be a part of something like that. So for me, I know that the type of breast cancer I have, it's very aggressive, and it's also very highly, more Black women receive it than our white counterparts, and more Black women also pass away because of that. And so it's so important that clinical trials are spoken about. And I think someone had mentioned before that it should be something that maybe, I think it was Greta, that it should be something that's told to the patient at the very beginning of treatment. Because when you're told something like that, that you're diagnosed with something terrible, but when you're told that there is actually a trial that you're aware of and kind of give them that little tidbit of information, it can help on so many levels. Another thing I wanted to say within the clinical trial team here at RVH is that everything was kind of seamless for me. So when you're coming in as a patient, you don't want confusion. You don't want to be dealing with people who maybe make you feel like you're bothering them. And so there was so much pressure taken off with me going into the clinical trial program, because the team was just amazing. And I felt as though I could approach them at any time. I could ask any questions. We kind of learned as we went along together. And I can honestly say that I keep my story. I shared it on my social media. And I had so many people ask me, like, clinical trial, what is that? What it's about? And I promoted 100%. Because prior to me being sick, like I said, I had no idea what it was about. So I just feel that it's super important that in some way, on many levels, that we share the fact that clinical trials is an option, and that, we entice people to be a part of that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Arlene and Greta. Our last speaker is, we're going to try to do, she is in Windsor, it's Dr. Carolyn Ham, who's a medical oncologist at the Cancer Program of Windsor Regional. She's a assistant professor in the Department of Oncology for UWO, and is the chair of Oncology Windsor Division of the School of Medicine. So give us a second. We've got Dr. Ham there. Can you hear us okay? Perfect. Okay, let's see if we can hear you.
So if she can try to unmute herself.
You unmute yourself and see if that's, or you're already unmuted. See
There you
if
go. How about that? Can you hear me?
Wonderful, we can hear you. Welcome,
Okay.
Dr. Ham, thanks so much.
Thank you. I don't know if you want to share my slides from there or do you want me to share them? I
If
gave
you can
them
try
to
to,
share.
You want to try to share your slides?
Sure, I can do that.
Sure.
Just try this. No, my share button is blocked out.
Okay, hold 2 seconds.
I did send them.
Mitch has them here, we're just gonna get loaded up.
Yeah.
I have them in my just share folder.
Okay.
We're just getting your slides up, just hold on for 2 seconds.
Sure.
Sorry.
There, yeah. There we go.
Are you
perfect.
moving?
We're gonna have to put,
Perfect, so you can see those slides, okay, Dr. Ham?
You just
Yeah,
said
I can see them.
We can
Thanks so
see them
much.
perfectly.
All right, well,
And
thanks
when-
so much for inviting me to talk. I really appreciate that, and I really enjoyed all of the talks today. I think they were really very good, and it's interesting to see the similarities between our hospital and your hospital and where we are in our journey in terms of clinical trials. So I'm going to talk about the Clinical Trials Navigator program that I run out of Windsor, and it really does help patients across Canada find clinical trials. That's our job. And we have done a lot of examination of the clinical trial ecosystem, like how hard is it for people to navigate clinical trials? So next slide. So these are some of the challenges that we've identified in terms of how to find patients going on to clinical trials. And so it's a little bit different than the literature. And I think we come from these, more community-based hospitals rather than the large academics. It's a little different. So I'm going to start the top right in the orange circle called No Trials at Home. So although it's so important that we offer clinical trials at home, it's very different. The average kind of center our size runs about 15 clinical trials at any one time, where Princess Margaret runs about 350. And so it's not really equitable access to clinical trials for everybody. And so, this is part of the problem, is that even though a patient might want a trial, there might be no trials at their own center. And so a lot of patients and their families will look on clinicaltrials.gov, just as the gray circle below there. It is the website people go to, but we've done some research and we're publishing on this now, is that half the time, even if a trial is on clinicaltrials.gov, you can't find it. And it's just the filters that have been built into that search system that is just quite imperfect. And so there's a lot of challenges that we have developed ways around this. So we have developed our own kind of way to search these clinicaltrials.gov to get a more reliable search. So we do that now. So if a patient looks for options, quite often, and I'm an oncologist myself, I've had people bring me lists of trials that are really not appropriate for them. And so I think it's training the oncologist not to really look at the list of potential trials the patient brings in. And even considering the time it takes for a doctor to review those clinical trials is sometimes challenging. Then the next is, even if they do find a trial, the next thing is what we're learning is when we refer people to clinical trials, we refer them to like Princess Margaret or Sunnybrook, but the trial looks like it's open, but it's not really open and all the spots are closed. So we're working on some avenues around trying to make sure we're not putting a potential trial on a list for patients if there's no spots open. We're learning financial concerns are a big deal as well. I recently had referred a patient to Princess Margaret from Windsor, and it cost him $2,000 for a weekend. And so these financial concerns really need to be addressed. So we are working on that as well. We have some pharmaceutical partners that are helping us with financial costs for travel. And I'll tell you right now, Gilead, if you have a trial, that's a Gilead trial. They actually will pay for all of the travel and housing for the patient. So they give them this green card that's like a credit card. So we're learning that, and we're going to be challenging other pharmaceutical companies to stand up and do the same thing. This is really patient-based. Would you really want to leave your family and your home at this point in your journey? So that's such a personal decision. And it really speaks to phase 1 trials, and our phase 1 trials really ideal for someone to go away from their home for. And then we're also looking into special challenges for the Indigenous partners that we have, because they really are traveling outside their own culture and they're leaving their own community. So it's a bit of a challenge. And when you look at all of these challenges that patients have in terms of finding trials, we get the reality of today, which is 5% of patients go on clinical trials. And that's all North America. That's United States, Canada. Like the system needs help. There's no question. And I know I'm speaking to the choir right here, so I know everybody knows that. But this is what we tried to do. I'll go to the next slide. So if you look to the far left, the purple stuff, that's our color, because that's the color for all cancers. And that's our icon that looks like a little information sign running. And so what we try to do is actually help people find clinical trials. So I'll give you the link on the next slide, but basically we've had about 360 patients so far use our trial, use our service, and we have about 8% of those patients go on to interventional clinical trials. So that's above the 5% that you would normally get. So we're happy about that. There's obviously can be better, and we have lots of things in the work. We're working on the financial part. We're working on ensuring that it's an accurate list and it's open. We're working on trying to convince the oncologist to refer the patient. And so we have a few different avenues in, and I'm really excited to say we just got a CIHR grant to move that forward. So we're going to be expanding very intentionally into Winnipeg and Thunder Bay over the next year. Next slide. So this is our process. That's our QR code. It takes you to a REDCap link that takes you to a survey. We're actually improving our surveys and making them simpler for patients now. You fill out what you know about your cancer, and then we work through these master lists is what we use instead of going to clinicaltrials.gov each time. We find it more reliable to find clinical trials. And then we have 3 part-time navigators that prepare the report for the patient. I have a family doc that's worked with me for a couple of years that does the first review. I do the last review, and then we send it back to whoever sent it to us. And then we do analyze our data after, just to see where we can improve the process and for scholarly activities as well. Okay, next. So that's our poster. That's the QR code. We scan it right now. You could just register yourself into a clinical trial. You can also email us at clinic. This is not up and running yet because of our cyber attack that we just had. Everything crashed at our hospital for 3 months. And so we haven't had any email for 3 months, but it's supposed to come up and running in the next month. But we have this second one in info@clinicaltrialsnav.com. Or you can just that QR code, and so we do have a website that should be up and running very soon. It's almost finished, so I'm hoping in the next month, our website that'll be Clinical Trials Navigator. And that's my last slide. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Again. So I want to thank all of our panelists for a very comprehensive scope of clinical trials for both the Ontario and this week here at RVH. I want to open up for some questions from the audience and online. So if anyone has a question, we're going to pass around this microphone and comments. I will lead off like everyone thinks of theirs. So Dr. Ham spoke about a lot of the barriers to clinical trials, but I want to ask the panelists, what do you find here at RVH or in Canada in general are some of the major challenges with running clinical trials here?
A little bit. Can you hear me from here?
I'm gonna give you this one.
Okay, thank you, sorry.
Yeah.
Some of the barriers for us, I think we found could be the site selection to activation process. Some of them trials take quite a while for our site to get up and running. And we've had instances where we've gotten all that way only to find out a certain arm of a study has closed now. And so the patient population that we thought we would be able to enroll to this trial, we can no longer do that because they've closed a specific arm for a trial. And it could take us months. It takes us months and months to activate a trial, a lot of resources and staffing to do that. So that's one of the barriers we have. And I think there's also, again, as our patients have shared, with themselves as well as family and friends, that there's that stigma around research, being concerned about being a guinea pig. What kind of treatment is this? What kind of care that I'm going to get from this? And so our department works very hard, our staff works very hard with those patients that we do reach out to who have expressed interest in learning more about a trial, to ensure that they have all the information, that they fully understand what the trial is about, the treatment that they may get, the commitment that's required for that. And so working with some of those things, we're hoping to sort of break down some of those barriers for research. That's just a couple of the things. But there's also some barriers within Canada, I think, that we find, regulatory requirements, government requirements. Sometimes our sponsors may not be able to offer this trial to Canadian sites. So those are sometimes also some barriers for us where we may see a study that looks really interesting, but unfortunately they're only going to be selecting, 2 or 3 sites across Canada. And we're not going to be able to offer that trial to our patients.
A question from Jesse. Oh, was you guys need to add to that question? The barrier?
Yeah, I was just going to quickly add from an industry perspective, and Dr. Han talked a little bit about this already. So she was talking about having to refer patients to Princess Margaret from Windsor, for example, to participate in the trial. Our country is very big. And, speaking from an oncology perspective, not every hospital across Canada is equipped to run an oncology clinical trial. So we're really challenged, at least at AstraZeneca, to really expand our geographical footprint and bring clinical trials closer to home. And where that's not possible, work with our centers to reduce and hopefully eliminate the financial toxicity associated with participating in clinical trials, as Dr. Hammond also alluded to.
I'd like to also echo the Indigenous challenges that imagine driving a 401, but imagine having to fly from Moose Factory to Kingston to get your treatment out of your community. So major barriers there. Jesse, question?
Yeah, thank you to all panel members today. It was wonderful. Actually, I think you kind of answered my question then, and the idea that there's been a real shift in thinking about how clinical trials should be run across community hospitals. Community hospitals see about 65% of acute care patients across the country. We don't receive the same funding as our academic counterparts, but we are capable in a lot of circumstances of running trials. I was curious to see your thoughts and perspectives on how clinical trials can be, brought to community hospitals in a responsible and safe way. So that way we're either acting as a sub-site or even in some cases as lead sites like RVH.
Yes, I guess I'll start. In terms of bringing trials to new centers, I think a lot of it has to do with education. So at least at AstraZeneca, we're really working to bring trials to new centers, like I mentioned, expand our geographical footprint. So really understand where the needs are at that site based on the patient population that they have available to them, and also where the research interests are among the clinicians. Making sure that we're bringing the right trial to the right site and then helping them all along the way to make sure that they're equipped and also financially able to support that clinical trial in a safe way for patients.
Anyone else in the panel or?
Sure, I'll add to that. In terms of Jesse, and you'll help this on as well, but in terms of bringing those studies to the community, the challenges with and the differences between the academic centers and the community hospitals is clinician time. And how in the academic centers, there's more protected time for clinicians, where in the community, they may not have as much of that time. So that's things that we're looking into, and obviously resources and expanding that, and looking at different ways that we can help support that additional time that it does take, especially from the clinician perspective, to support that.
I would also suggest to reach out through CPN, because remote access to trials is one of their pet projects. And they're working closely with Pharma and Health Canada to expand that program. It already exists in the Children's Treatment Network and in Australia as well. So the wheel doesn't have to be reinvented. It just needs to have more Pouring facets on the right syllable.
Okay, any other last question? We're a little over time. Any one last question if we have any in the audience before we'll let you on with your day and thank our guests. Okay, well, on behalf of RVH, and I'd like to thank all of you for coming and sharing your stories, your expertise, and it's an exciting time. Like we're going to grow this clinical trials here in RVH and in our community, and it's a huge asset. I want to thank you all for all the work you do to make it possible. And thanks so much for joining us, Dr. Ham and Windsor. So let's give a round of applause for everyone.